So yeah, this video is about a cemetery. More on YouTube. Friedhof Ohlsdorf is actually the largest garden cemetery in the world. It's over 4 kilometers long. I will show you a map which includes the airport, which isn't far away, and the cemeteries, to give you an idea of how massive this place really is. Of course, many notable people from Hamburg are buried here, and the place even has its own museum, an open air museum on burial culture. We'll check that out. So how did this place actually come to be? Well, until the late 1700s, graveyards were usually found right next to churches in the city. And soon enough, these places ran out of space for new graves. And also, it wasn't very hygienic. So new graveyards were founded outside of the city limits, larger ones, but the city just kept growing very fast during that time in history, and soon enough they ran out of space there again. So a whole new idea had to be developed. So in the 1870s then, some lawmakers from the parliament and some senators from the city started developing a concept for a large garden cemetery way outside of town in what later became the Ohlsdorf Cemetery. Now, there was another thing that heavily influenced this development, and that's that humanist ideals dominated the discussion back then, and the town simply wanted to take burials away from the churches and put them under communal administration, which means that everybody, regardless of your religion, of your confession, can have a burial. And if you're hearing cars in the background, yes, you do. This place has its own road network, and there are even public buses going through here. So will this giant cemetery eventually get too small again, like all the others? Actually, the opposite is true. Demand for grave areas is declining. The reasons are there are many more forms of burial now, like cremations and sea burials and burials in forests. So actually several areas here that were formerly used for graves have been converted back into parkland, and that trend is ongoing. Okay, so this is the museum that I mentioned, and it's actually about tombstones, about headstones. So some of these look like seriously old, probably one of the very first ones that were put up here in the 1870s or 1880s when it all started. Let's look about. I would say they look even much older than that, but I don't know if they are. If they were brought here from the old cemeteries in Hamburg maybe, or there are no signs or anything. It's not really explained, it's just displayed. Okay, this one says it was donated in 1611, so yeah, much older than the cemetery itself. So many of these weren't actually for individual graves, but more for brotherhoods and certain professions and people who probably couldn't afford their own graves. They were like buried in these kind of mass graves, funded by their respective brotherhood. That's like the one for butter and cheese dealers. There's one for barrel makers and wine makers and all sorts of different brotherhoods. And yeah, I just found out that these were brought here when another cemetery, which was back then right outside the city walls but now is very much in the city center, was converted into the park that we now know as Planten und Blumen. So that was a former cemetery as well. And then those tombstones here were brought here. So this part is like a cemetery within the cemetery, and it's wholly dedicated to women who are buried here, and you get some information on some of them actually. I'm not doing grave hopping here, and there are even no maps for where whose grave is, but I just found that one by accident. I remember him. He used to be Hamburg's mayor in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, around that time. Alright, I'm heading back towards the living. I hope you enjoyed this little walk around the largest garden cemetery in the world. I might come back maybe in spring or summer and do a longer video about it. We will see. But for now, I just hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and take care and see you soon.